Elena's between jobs right now, you know how the market is, my husband David announced to his family gathered around the Thanksgiving table, dismissing my career with the casual wave of someone who'd been telling this lie so long he'd started believing it himself. I'm the breadwinner, but we manage. She keeps busy with her little shopping trips and lunch dates. His mother Patricia nodded sympathetically, the same condescending expression she'd worn for our entire 8-year marriage, while his sister Amanda smirked and whispered something to her husband that made them both laugh. I sat in silence, wearing the modest dress I always wore to family gatherings, playing the role David had assigned me years ago, the unemployed wife dependent on her successful husband's regional sales manager salary. Then the doorbell rang. When David opened it, his boss Marcus Whitmore stood on the porch, tablet in hand, looking stressed. Mrs. Thornton, thank God you're here. Ma'am, should I have prepared the Q4 projections? The Singapore call moved to tonight and I need your approval on the restructuring proposal. David's face went completely blank. His mother looked between Marcus and me with growing confusion. Why is he calling her ma'am? Because, I said, finally allowing myself to smile, I own the company. Let me tell you about the husband who was ashamed of his wife's success and the Thanksgiving dinner that exposed everything. I started Thornton Logistics in my parents' garage when I was 24. Fresh out of business school with $12,000 in savings and an idea for streamlining regional shipping operations, I'd built something from nothing, first one client, then 5, then 50. By the time I met David at a mutual friend's wedding, the company had 40 employees and revenues approaching $8 million annually. I was successful. Visibly, documentably successful. And from the moment David introduced me to his family, that success became a problem. The Thornton family had expectations. David's father had been the provider, his mother the homemaker, a traditional arrangement they considered the only acceptable model. David's sister Amanda had married a surgeon and immediately quit her job to focus on family building. The Thornton women didn't work, they supported their husbands' careers. When David first mentioned my company, his mother's response was telling. Oh, a little business? That's nice, dear. Something to keep you busy until the children come. I'd been too in love to recognize the warning signs. David proposed after 2 years of dating. By then, my little business employed 75 people and had revenues of $14 million. I'd been featured in regional business publications, invited to speak at entrepreneurship conferences, recognized as one of the city's most successful young business owners. None of which impressed the Thornton family. She works too much, Patricia would say to David, loudly enough for me to hear. A wife should be available for her husband. How will she manage children if she's always at the office? Real women don't need careers, Amanda added during one particularly painful dinner. They need purpose. Family is purpose. David never defended me. Not once. The compromise happened gradually. Maybe don't mention the company so much around my family, David suggested after our engagement party, where his mother had spent an hour making pointed comments about women who prioritized money over motherhood. They're uncomfortable with it. Just downplay it a little. I downplayed it. Then I downplayed it more. Elena works from home sometimes, became Elena does some consulting, became Elena's taking a break to focus on us, became, eventually, Elena's between jobs. The lie evolved until David had completely erased my career from his family's understanding of our life. Here's what David's family believed about our marriage. They believed David was the successful one, a regional sales manager at a growing logistics company, earning good money, providing for his family. They believed I was the dependent wife who'd never quite found her footing, professionally, who spent my days shopping and having lunch with friends, who contributed nothing financially to our household. They believed this because David told them this. Repeatedly. For 8 years. Here's what was actually true. The growing logistics company David worked for was Thornton Logistics. My company. I'd hired him 4 years into our marriage when he was struggling to find work after a layoff. He'd asked me not to tell his family, just until I proved myself, and I'd agreed because I loved him and wanted to protect his pride. The proving himself never happened. The lie never ended. David worked in regional sales at a company I'd built from nothing, earning a salary I approved, reporting to managers I'd hired, while telling his family I was unemployed. The arrangement had seemed manageable at first. I loved David. I believed he loved me. And his family's approval, while nice to have, wasn't essential to our happiness. But over 8 years, the lie had metastasized into something uglier. David began believing his own story. He'd reference his career and his professional development as if the job he held wasn't created specifically because I'd wanted to help him. He'd complain about incompetent upper management without acknowledging that upper management included his wife. At family gatherings, he'd accept praise for his success while I sat silently, wearing deliberately modest clothing, playing the role he'd assigned me. I'd been complicit in my own erasure. Until Thanksgiving. The Singapore deal had been in development for 18 months. A partnership with a major Asian shipping consortium that would expand Thornton Logistics into international markets, the biggest opportunity in the company's history. The restructuring proposal we'd been negotiating would transform us from a regional player into a global competitor. I'd been managing the negotiations personally, working with our Singapore counterparts through countless late-night calls, building relationships that would shape the company's future for decades. The final approval call had been scheduled for Monday. Until it wasn't. Marcus Whitmore's appearance at the Thornton family Thanksgiving was not coincidental. He'd called me that afternoon, frantic. The Singapore team wanted to move the call to that evening, citing scheduling conflicts with their executive board. The restructuring proposal needed my approval before the call. Marcus had been unable to reach me by phone, I'd silenced it for dinner, and had driven to the only location he knew I'd be. He didn't know he was about to expose his boss's husband's 8-year lie. He just knew the company needed its CEO. "Ma'am, should I have prepared the Q4 projections?" The words hung in the dining room, incongruous and unexplainable within the reality David had constructed. Marcus was professionally dressed, tablet in hand, clearly addressing me with the deference appropriate for speaking to one's employer. He hadn't yet registered the family's confusion or David's frozen expression. The Singapore call, they moved it to 9 p.m. their time, which is tonight for us. I need your approval on sections 3 and 7 of the proposal before I can send it. Patricia was the first to find words. Why is he calling her ma'am? I looked at David, giving him one final chance to tell the truth himself. He said nothing. Because I own the company, I said. Thornton Logistics. The company David works for. I'm the founder and CEO. The silence that followed was extraordinary. Patricia's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally something that looked like betrayal, not at me, but at her son. Amanda's smirk had vanished entirely. David's father, who rarely spoke at family gatherings, set down his fork with unusual deliberation. And David himself looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble in real time. "That's impossible," Patricia finally said. "David is the sales manager, he's told us about his career progression, his responsibilities. David is a regional sales manager at my company. He reports to our VP of sales, who reports to our COO, who reports to me." I kept my voice calm, factual. "I hired him 4 years ago when he was struggling to find work. He asked me not to tell you. I agreed because I wanted to protect his feelings." "But you said you were between jobs." David said that. I never corrected him because I didn't want to humiliate him in front of his family. I paused. That was probably a mistake. Marcus, finally reading the room, stepped back toward the door. "Mrs. Thornton, I can come back." "No. Give me the tablet. I'll review the proposal here." I took the device from his hands and began scrolling through the restructuring document, conducting business at my in-laws' Thanksgiving table while 8 years of lies evaporated around me. "David," his father said slowly, "is this true?" David couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "It's complicated. Elena's company, it's not, I do important work there." "You work for your wife," Amanda interrupted. "This whole time, all you're bragging about your career, you work for your wife and you've been pretending she's unemployed." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Patricia's voice had turned cold. "Explain to me how you've spent 8 years telling us Elena was dependent on you while you were actually dependent on her." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. 8 years of playing a role that diminished me, protecting a man who'd chosen his family's approval over our marriage's honesty. 8 years of sitting at this table absorbing condescension I didn't deserve from people who didn't know me. The lie had been David's, but the complicity had been mine. "The proposal looks good," I told Marcus, handing back the tablet. "Approve sections 3 and 7. I'll join the call from here if I need to." "Yes, ma'am. I'll set up the conference line." He retreated to the porch to make calls, leaving the family to their confrontation. Patricia stood abruptly. "I need to understand something. Elena, you built this company yourself? From nothing?" "From $12,000 and an idea, yes." "And it's successful?" "It's not some small operation. Thornton Logistics employs 432 people across 6 states. Our annual revenue last year was $78 million. The Singapore deal we're negotiating tonight will potentially double that within 3 years." Patricia sat back down heavily. "And you let us think, all these years?" "I let David tell you whatever made him comfortable. That was my mistake." I looked at my husband, who still couldn't meet my eyes. I thought protecting his pride was more important than telling the truth. I was wrong. Amanda, surprisingly, was the first to apologize. "I've been horrible to you. All those comments about your shopping habit, your lunch dates, I thought you were some kind of gold digger living off my brother." "I know what you thought. Why didn't you say something?" Why didn't you defend yourself? Because your brother asked me not to. Because I loved him and I wanted his family to accept me. I paused. I didn't realize that their acceptance would require my diminishment. The Singapore call happened at 8 p.m. I took it in the Thorntons' home office, spending an hour negotiating terms that would shape my company's future while the family sat in the living room, processing revelations that had upended their understanding of two of its members. The call went well. The partnership was confirmed. Thornton Logistics would expand into Asia within 18 months. When I emerged, David was waiting in the hallway. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes. We do. I can explain." "You can't. There's no explanation that makes 8 years of lying acceptable. There's no context that makes telling your family I'm unemployed while I sign your paychecks anything other than what it is." I was ashamed. Of what? Of having a successful wife? Of being married to someone who built something from nothing? Of needing your help? Of not being the provider my family expected me to be? So instead of being honest about our partnership, you erased my accomplishments entirely. Made me look like a failure so you could look like a success. He had no response. "I've spent 8 years in your family's shadow," I continued. "Wearing modest clothes so I wouldn't outshine you. Never mentioning my work so you wouldn't feel diminished. Accepting insults from people who thought I contributed nothing to our marriage. I never asked you to. You asked me to downplay it. Then to not mention it. Then to actively pretend it didn't exist. And I agreed, every time, because I thought that's what love required. Doesn't it? No. Love requires honesty. Love requires being proud of each other. Love requires not building your self-image on your partner's deliberate humiliation." The drive home was silent. Not the comfortable silence of a married couple with nothing to say, but the heavy silence of two people who'd finally confronted a truth they'd been avoiding for years. The divorce conversation happened a week later. Not angry, not dramatic, just two people acknowledging that a marriage built on lies couldn't survive their exposure. "I can't be what your family wants," I told David. "And you can't be proud of who I actually am. That's not a partnership. It's a performance. I do love you. I believe you. But you love the version of me you could diminish more than the version who threatens your self-image. That's not enough for me. Not anymore." David resigned from Thornton Logistics a month after the divorce was finalized. He found a position at a competing firm, smaller, less successful, but entirely separate from me. I didn't contest it. I wished him well, actually. I'd loved him once, and despite everything, I didn't want him to fail. I wanted him to succeed somewhere I wouldn't have to watch him pretend I didn't exist. The Thornton family surprised me. Patricia called 3 months after the divorce, an apology I hadn't expected and didn't require but appreciated nonetheless. "I was wrong about you. Wrong about what a wife should be, wrong about David's stories, wrong about everything." Her voice carried genuine regret. "You built something remarkable. You should have been celebrated, not hidden." "Thank you. David is my son and I love him, but what he did was shameful. Letting you sit at my table for 8 years absorbing criticism you didn't deserve, I'm embarrassed by my own behavior. You believed what you were told. I believed what I wanted to believe. There's a difference." Amanda reached out separately, wanting to invest in a side business she was developing. I connected her with resources but didn't participate directly, too complicated, too much history. But the conversation we had surprised me. She'd started questioning her own choices, wondering whether her immediate departure from the workforce had been entirely her preference or partly the family's pressure. "You showed me something that night," she admitted. "That women can build things that matter. That success doesn't require permission. It never did. I know that now." The Singapore partnership launched on schedule. Thornton Logistics expanded into Asian markets, growing from $78 million to $156 million in revenue over the next 3 years. The company I'd built in my parents' garage became an international operation with over 1,000 employees across 12 countries. My name was in business publications, on conference stages, in conversations about successful entrepreneurship. No one asked about my husband anymore. I think about that Thanksgiving sometimes. The moment Marcus walked in, tablet in hand, inadvertently exposing everything David had spent 8 years hiding. The look on my mother-in-law's face when she realized her unemployed daughter-in-law actually employed her son. I don't feel vindicated by it. I feel sad. Sad that David's insecurity was so profound he'd rather erase my accomplishments than celebrate them. Sad that I'd agreed to be erased because I thought that's what marriage required. Sad that it took public exposure rather than private honesty to end a performance we'd both been complicit in. "Elena's between jobs right now. I'm the breadwinner." David said those words like they were facts, not lies. He believed them, I think. Had told them so many times they'd become his truth. But truth has a way of emerging. Sometimes through a boss who doesn't know he's about to detonate a marriage. Sometimes through a tablet held out to a woman in a modest dress who actually runs the company. Sometimes through the simple question that changes everything. Why is he calling her ma'am? Because I own the company. Because I built something real while being told I was worthless. Because I let myself be hidden for too long, and I'll never do it again.